Raymond had earned every bit of peace he now enjoyed. After 25 years wearing the badge, walking beats in neighborhoods that ranged from quiet suburbs to streets where gunshots were the neighborhood alarm clock, he'd finally hung up his uniform. The retirement party was nice, sure. Speeches, a plaque, some laughs with old partners. But what he really looked forward to was sleeping past 5 in the morning and not having to explain himself to anyone. His house sat on a quiet street, where kids still rode bikes and people actually waved to each other. The backyard was his pride and joy. He'd spent 2 summers getting it just right. The pool wasn't one of those fancy infinity edge things you see in magazines. It was practical, clean with good filtering and enough room for his grandkids to splash around when they visited. Around it, he'd built a nice deck, planted some hedges for privacy, and put up a fence that met every code requirement the county could throw at him. Most mornings, Raymond would make his coffee, walk out to the pool, and just breathe. No radios crackling with emergencies, no court dates circled on the calendar, no partners calling at midnight because a case went sideways. Just birds, coffee, and the sound of water gently filtering through the pump. This was what he'd worked for. The house next door had been empty for 3 months. The previous owners were an elderly couple who'd moved to Florida to be near their daughter. Nice people. They'd brought him cookies once when he first moved in, and he'd helped them with their garbage cans when they got too heavy to wheel to the curb. When they left, Raymond figured he'd get another set of quiet neighbors. Maybe a young family, maybe some retirees like himself. The neighborhood tended to attract people looking for calm. The moving truck showed up on a Tuesday morning. Raymond was trimming the hedges along his fence line when he heard it backing into the driveway. He kept working but glanced over occasionally. Moving was stressful enough without neighbors staring, so he gave them space. By afternoon, the truck was gone, and he could hear furniture being dragged across floors through the open windows. He didn't meet her until 2 days later. Raymond was checking the pool's chemical levels, something he did twice a week like clockwork, when he heard a voice call over the fence. "Excuse me? Hello?" He looked up to see a woman in her early 40s standing in the neighboring yard, holding a small dog that yapped the moment it saw him. She had that look some people get when they're sizing you up, deciding if you're worth their time. "Hey there," Raymond said, straightening up and wiping his hands on his shorts. "You must be the new neighbor. Welcome to the street." "Yes, I'm Linda," she said, not smiling. "I just moved in. I wanted to introduce myself and, well, I noticed your pool is quite close to the property line." Raymond felt his jaw tighten slightly but kept his expression neutral. 25 years of dealing with difficult people had taught him to recognize a certain tone. This wasn't a friendly observation. This was the opening move in something. "Nice to meet you, Linda. I'm Raymond. And yeah, the pool's built right where it's supposed to be. Had it surveyed before construction. All permitted through the county. Everything's by the book." Linda smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Oh, I'm sure it is. I'd just like to know these things. Property lines can be so confusing, can't they? I'll probably have my own survey done just to be certain about where everything sits." "Sure, that's your right," Raymond said evenly. "You'll find everything matches up. Previous owners and I had no issues." "Mm-hmm," Linda said, looking past him at the pool setup. "And you use a lot of chemicals in there, I imagine. For maintenance?" "Standard pool chemicals. Nothing unusual. Been maintaining pools for 15 years, never had a problem. I just worry about runoff, you know. I have a very sensitive garden planned." "Chemicals can be so harsh," Raymond nodded slowly. "Pool's a closed system. Chemicals stay in the pool. When I drain it for maintenance, it goes right into the sewer system, same as everyone else's. All legal and proper." "Of course," Linda said, though her tone suggested she wasn't entirely convinced. "Well, I should let you get back to it. I'm sure we'll be seeing each other around." She walked away without waiting for a response, her little dog still yapping over her shoulder. Raymond watched her go, that old instinct from his police days pinging in the back of his mind. He'd dealt with thousands of people in his career. Most were decent folks having bad days or caught in bad situations, but some people carried trouble with them like luggage, always ready to unpack it on whoever was nearby. He tried to shake off the feeling. Maybe she was just stressed from the move. New house, new neighborhood, trying to establish herself. People said awkward things when they were nervous. He'd give her the benefit of the doubt. That benefit lasted about 4 days. Raymond was hosting his daughter and her two kids for the weekend. It was one of those perfect summer afternoons where the heat wasn't oppressive yet, and the pool was exactly the right temperature. His grandkids, 7 and 9, were having the time of their lives, jumping in and splashing with the kind of pure joy only kids could manage. His daughter was stretched out on a lounge chair, actually relaxing for once, which as a single mom working 2 jobs was rarer than snow in July. The music was on. Nothing crazy, just some old Motown playing from a small speaker on the deck. The kids were laughing. Raymond was grilling burgers, and for a moment everything felt perfect. This was exactly why he'd worked so hard for so long. Then Linda appeared at the fence. She didn't call out politely or wait for a break in the activity. She just stood there staring, her face pinched tight like she'd bitten into something sour. When Raymond noticed her, he turned down the music. "Hey Linda, nice afternoon, isn't it?" "It would be if I could hear myself think," she said sharply. "The noise from over here is excessive. I'm trying to read in my yard and it's like being at a public pool." Raymond glanced at his daughter, who'd sat up and was watching with concern. The kids had stopped splashing and were treading water quietly, sensing the tension adults brought. "It's 2 in the afternoon on a Saturday," Raymond said, keeping his voice calm and even. "We're not being loud, just kids playing in the pool. Well, some of us don't have children and would appreciate some peace and quiet. This is a residential neighborhood, not a recreational facility." "These are my grandkids," Raymond said, and something in his tone made Linda take a half step back. "They're visiting for the weekend. They're allowed to play and laugh in their grandfather's pool. We're not breaking any noise ordinances. Trust me, I know what they are." Linda's eyes narrowed. "I don't appreciate your tone. I'm simply asking for consideration. The screaming is disturbing." "They're not screaming. They're being kids, normal happy kids. If this continues, I'll have to file a complaint with the Homeowners Association. Excessive noise is grounds for—" "File whatever you want," Raymond said, his patience finally wearing thin. "There's nothing excessive happening here. We're using our property exactly as we're entitled to. Now if you'll excuse me, I have burgers to flip." He turned his back on her, a calculated move he'd learned long ago. Sometimes the best response was no response. He heard her huff and walk away, her footsteps angry against the grass. His daughter came over, worry written across her face. "Dad, maybe we should go inside." "Absolutely not," Raymond said, flipping a burger with maybe a bit more force than necessary. "This is our home. You and the kids are doing nothing wrong. Don't let her steal your joy." But the afternoon had lost some of its shine. The kids were quieter now, their laughter more subdued. His daughter kept glancing toward the fence like she expected Linda to reappear. Raymond felt anger burning in his chest. Not the hot explosive kind, but the slow steady kind that came from being treated like a problem when you'd done nothing wrong. Over the next week, things got weirder. Raymond noticed Linda standing at her window watching his backyard. Not glancing out while doing dishes or happening to look that direction. Actually standing there sometimes for minutes at a time, just staring. When he'd look up and make eye contact, she wouldn't even pretend to be doing something else. She'd just keep staring. Then came the photos. He was watering his garden one evening when he heard the distinctive click of a camera shutter. He looked over to see Linda standing in her yard with her phone pointed directly at his property. She was taking pictures of his fence, his pool, his deck, systematically documenting everything. "Can I help you with something?" Raymond called over. "I'm documenting the property line situation," Linda called back, not lowering her phone. "For my records, you're taking pictures of my property." "That's weird, Linda. It's a shared fence line. I have every right to photograph what concerns my property." Raymond bit back about a dozen responses that wouldn't help the situation. Instead, he went inside, pulled out his own phone, and took pictures of her taking pictures of him. If she wanted to play documentation games, he'd been doing that professionally for 2.5 decades. His reports had put people in prison. Her cell phone photos wouldn't hold up to that level of scrutiny, if this ever went somewhere official. His wife would have told him to just talk to Linda, try to smooth things over. But his wife had passed 3 years ago, and sometimes Raymond missed her calming influence. She'd known how to handle difficult people with grace where he tended toward directness, but she wasn't here and he had to handle this himself. The situation continued to simmer. Linda complained to other neighbors about him, he later learned. Told them his pool maintenance created chemical smells that gave her headaches. Said his filtration system ran too loudly at night. claimed his fence was possibly on her property. None of it was true, but truth didn't always matter when someone was determined to create problems. Raymond started keeping a log. Date, time, incident. Just like a police report, he documented every interaction, every complaint, every time he caught her staring or taking photos. He didn't know if he'd need it, but his gut told him this woman wasn't finished. People like Linda didn't just give up and move on. They escalated. They pushed until they either got what they wanted or something stopped them. What Raymond didn't know yet was just how far Linda was willing to push, and how much she'd underestimated exactly who she was pushing against. A man didn't spend 25 years wearing a badge without learning a thing or two about dealing with people who thought rules didn't apply to them. The real trouble was still coming. This was just the opening act. 3 weeks into having Linda as a neighbor, Raymond learned that things could always get worse. He'd thought the staring and photo taking was bad. He'd dealt with the complaints about noise and chemicals and property lines. But what happened next crossed a line he hadn't expected anyone to cross. It started small, like most problems do. Raymond woke up one morning to find a lawn chair on his side of the fence. Not right against the fence, but a good 3 feet into his yard, positioned under the shade of his oak tree. The tree sat entirely on his property, its branches spreading wide enough to provide shade well past the fence line. He stood there in his bathrobe, coffee in hand, staring at this chair like it might explain itself. It was one of those cheap folding jobs, the kind that cost $15 at a big box store. But it wasn't the chair that bothered him. It was what it represented. Linda had come into his yard without permission and put her furniture there like she owned the place. Raymond picked up the chair, folded it, and leaned it against the fence on her side. He didn't knock on her door, didn't leave a note, just moved it back where it belonged and went about his day. Maybe it was a mistake, he thought. Maybe the wind blew it over, though that seemed unlikely given it was folded. The next morning the chair was back. Same spot, unfolded like someone planned to sit there. This time there were 2 chairs plus a small side table. Raymond felt his blood pressure rise. He'd been managing it well since retirement, taking his medication, eating better, staying active. But Linda was becoming a health hazard all by herself. He took photos of the furniture arrangement with his phone, making sure to capture the fence line and the clear distance into his property. Then he carried all of it back to her side again. This time he did knock on her door. Linda answered wearing workout clothes and holding a green smoothie, looking annoyed that he'd interrupted her morning. "Your furniture keeps ending up in my yard," Raymond said, keeping his voice level. "I need you to stop putting it there." "That's shared space," Linda said, like she was explaining something to a child. "The tree provides shade on both sides of the fence. I'm simply using the natural resources available. The tree is on my property. The shade it creates is on my property. You're trespassing." Linda took a long sip of her smoothie, maintaining eye contact in a way that felt deliberately challenging. "I think you're being unnecessarily territorial about a little bit of shade. Most neighbors would be happy to share. Most neighbors would ask before putting their furniture in someone else's yard. Most neighbors would respect property lines. I don't think a few feet matters that much. You have all that space. What difference does it make if I put a chair there?" Raymond could feel his jaw clenching. This was the kind of conversation he'd had 100 times on the job, usually with people who thought they were above rules that applied to everyone else. "The difference is that it's my property, not yours. I'm asking you politely to keep your furniture on your side of the fence. This is the only time I'm going to ask nicely. Are you threatening me?" Linda's voice went up an octave, theatrical and sharp. "Because that sounds like a threat. I don't appreciate being threatened by my neighbor." "It's not a threat. It's a clear statement of boundaries. Stay on your property, I'll stay on mine." He walked away before she could respond, before he could say something he'd regret. 25 years of dealing with difficult people had taught him when to disengage. Some arguments you couldn't win because the other person wasn't interested in resolution. They were interested in conflict. The furniture disappeared for a few days. Raymond thought maybe his direct approach had worked. Then he started noticing other things. Small things. A cup left on his deck railing. A towel draped over his fence. Footprints in the mulch around his garden that weren't his. Someone was coming into his yard when he wasn't looking. He started paying more attention to the gate. He usually kept it latched but not locked. In a neighborhood like this, he'd never felt the need for locks on the backyard gate. But now he made sure to lock it every time he went out. He also adjusted the security camera he'd installed years ago for insurance purposes. It covered the back door, but if he angled it differently, it could catch most of the fence line and the pool area. The camera proved useful faster than he expected. Raymond had gone to the grocery store, a routine trip that took maybe an hour. When he got home and checked the camera footage on his phone, a habit he'd developed lately, he saw something that made his stomach drop. Linda had been in his yard. Not just near the fence line, but all the way into his space, walking around his pool, looking in his windows, even testing his back door to see if it was unlocked. She'd spent a good 10 minutes poking around like she was shopping for real estate. On the footage, she even made a phone call, gesturing at his property while talking to whoever was on the other end. Raymond saved the footage immediately, backed it up to 3 different places. This wasn't neighbor nosiness anymore. This was trespassing, clear and documented. He could file a police report with this. But he didn't, not yet. He wanted to see where this was going. Wanted to build a complete picture before he made any official moves. Sometimes the best way to deal with a problem was to let it fully reveal itself. He did confront her, though. Knocked on her door that evening with his phone in hand, the video queued up and ready. "We need to talk," he said when she answered. "And before you deny anything, I have video." Linda's face went through several expressions in quick succession. Surprise, annoyance, then something like calculation. "I don't know what you're talking about." Raymond held up his phone, showing her the paused video of herself clearly visible in his backyard. "You were in my yard today, while I was out. You tried my back door. You looked in my windows. That's trespassing, Linda. That's illegal." "I thought I heard a noise," she said quickly. "I was checking to see if everything was all right. Being a good neighbor. By trying my door handle? By walking around my pool? That's not checking on anything. That's snooping. I don't appreciate your accusations. I was being thoughtful, and this is the thanks I get. Maybe if you were friendlier, people wouldn't need to check on your property." The logic was so twisted Raymond almost laughed. Almost. "Stay out of my yard. I have this on video. If it happens again, I'm filing a police report. We clear?" "File whatever you want," Linda said, her mask of innocence dropping. "I'm sure your police friends will be very interested in how aggressive you're being toward a woman living alone. How threatening you are." There it was. The implicit accusation. The suggestion that he was the problem. Raymond had seen this playbook before. Turn the victim into the aggressor. Make reasonable boundaries seem like unreasonable hostility. "Good evening, Linda," he said and walked away. His hands were shaking slightly, not from fear but from anger. The controlled, professional kind that came from knowing someone was trying to manipulate you and being powerless to stop it through reason. The next few weeks were an exercise in psychological warfare. Linda started running her sprinklers at odd hours, positioned so they'd spray over the fence onto his deck. When he moved his outdoor furniture to avoid the water, she'd adjust the sprinklers again. She began having loud phone conversations in her yard, always within earshot, always about difficult neighbors and aggressive men and feeling unsafe. She complained to the homeowners association about his pool maintenance schedule, claiming the filter noise violated quiet hours. It didn't. Raymond had checked the HOA rules front to back, knew them better than the board members probably did. But it meant he had to respond to official letters, provide documentation, prove he was following rules he'd never broken. She complained about his trash cans, saying they were an eyesore. They were the same cans everyone on the street had, in the same place everyone kept them. She complained about his car being parked in his own driveway, saying it blocked her view of what Raymond couldn't imagine. Every complaint was documented, photographed, time-stamped in his growing file. He'd started a binder, something his wife used to tease him about. "You and your binders," she'd say, laughing at how he organized everything. But organization was serving him well now. Every interaction with Linda went into the record. Every piece of evidence was preserved. His neighbors started noticing. Tom from 2 houses down stopped him while he was getting his mail. "Hey, is everything okay with you and the new neighbor? She's been saying some things." "What kind of things?" Raymond asked, though he could guess. "Just that you're difficult. Territorial. She made it sound like you're harassing her about property line stuff. But I know you, man. You're not like that. Figured I'd ask directly." Raymond appreciated Tom's approach. Direct questions deserve direct answers. "She's been trespassing in my yard, Tom. I've asked her to stop. I've been nothing but polite, but she's turning it around on me." making me out to be the problem. Tom nodded slowly. Yeah, that tracks with something. She tried to tell me my dog was too loud. My dog barely barks. Old Beagle mostly sleeps all day. I got the feeling she just likes complaining. Good to know I'm not the only one. You're definitely not. Karen on the corner said Linda complained about her garden blocking sunlight. Garden's been there 12 years. Didn't block sunlight until Linda needed something to complain about. This information was valuable. Raymond wasn't isolated in this. Linda was establishing a pattern, and other neighbors were noticing. That could matter if things escalated further. Things escalated further on a Wednesday afternoon. Raymond had a doctor's appointment, routine checkup for his blood pressure medication. He was gone for maybe 2 hours, accounting for drive time and the inevitable wait at the medical office. When he pulled back into his driveway, he heard splashing. For a second, he thought maybe a bird had gotten into the pool. It happened sometimes. Then he heard children's laughter, high-pitched, excited, the sound of kids having fun. In his pool. His locked pool area. His very clearly private property. Raymond walked around to the back gate, which he'd definitely locked that morning. It was standing open. The lock had been undone, not broken, which meant someone had reached over and unlatched it from the inside. Inside his pool area were 3 children, probably between 6 and 10 years old, splashing and playing. And sitting in one of his pool chairs wearing sunglasses and a bathing suit like she owned the place was Linda. For a long moment, Raymond just stood there. His brain was processing what he was seeing, trying to fit it into any framework that made sense. This wasn't nosiness or boundary pushing anymore. This was blatant, unapologetic theft of his property for her personal use. What? Raymond said, his voice deadly calm. Do you think you're doing? Linda looked over and she didn't even have the decency to look embarrassed. Oh, you're back. We were just cooling off. The kids wanted to swim and I didn't think you'd mind since you weren't using it. Get out of my pool, Raymond said. Right now. There's no need to be rude. We're not hurting anything. It's just water. It's my water, my pool, my property. You broke into my locked yard and brought children into my pool without permission. That's trespassing, that's breaking and entering, and if one of those kids gets hurt, I'm liable. Get them out now or I'm calling the police. The kids had stopped playing, sensing the adult tension. They were treading water quietly, looking between Raymond and Linda with worried faces. Raymond felt bad for them. This wasn't their fault. Their mom or aunt or whoever Linda was to them had made a terrible decision, and they were caught in the middle. Linda stood up slowly, making a show of gathering her things. You're being completely unreasonable. What kind of person won't share a pool with children? It's selfish. What kind of person breaks into someone's property and acts like they're entitled to it? Raymond shot back. Get your things. Get those kids. Get out of my yard. And Linda? Don't ever come back here, ever. I'll go where I please, Linda said, her voice rising. You don't own the neighborhood. You don't get to tell me what to do. I own this property, and on this property I absolutely do. You've got 30 seconds before I call 911. Raymond pulled out his phone, and that seemed to finally register. Linda hurried the kids out of the pool, wrapping them in towels that Raymond realized were also his towels from his pool storage box. She was stealing his towels while trespassing in his pool. The audacity would be impressive if it wasn't so infuriating. This isn't over, Linda said as she ushered the kids toward the gate. You're going to regret treating me this way. The only one with regrets here is you, Raymond said. And trust me, they're coming. He watched them leave, making sure they were completely off his property. Then he locked the gate, this time adding a second lock higher up that couldn't be reached by someone leaning over. He went inside, downloaded the security footage of Linda entering his yard and using his pool without permission, and sat down at his computer. It was time to stop playing defense. Time to stop reacting to Linda's provocations. Raymond had spent 25 years building cases, documenting evidence, and presenting facts that courts couldn't ignore. He'd been going easy on Linda, giving her chances to back down, trying to handle this neighborly. That approach was over. Linda wanted to escalate. Fine. But she just escalated with someone who knew exactly how to build an airtight case. And unlike her, Raymond actually understood what evidence looked like, what documentation mattered, and how to present it to people with authority. Linda had made a critical mistake. She'd assumed that a retired cop was just a regular citizen she could push around. What she didn't understand was that the badge might be gone, but the skills weren't. And she'd just given him everything he needed to make her seriously regret the day she decided his pool looked better than whatever she could afford. The real battle was about to begin, and Raymond was done being nice. Raymond spent that evening organizing his evidence like he was preparing for a major court case. In a way, he was. Not a criminal trial, but something that required the same level of precision and attention to detail. He'd learned a long time ago that feelings didn't matter much in official proceedings. Facts did, documentation did. Clear, undeniable evidence that told a story nobody could argue with. He created a timeline, starting from the day Linda moved in. Every interaction, every incident, every complaint and confrontation went onto a spreadsheet with dates, times, and brief descriptions. Next to each entry, he noted what evidence he had. Photos, videos, witnesses, written complaints. The document grew to 3 pages, and he'd only known Linda for about 6 weeks. That alone told a story. The video footage was the strongest piece. He had Linda entering his yard multiple times without permission.
He had her trying his door handle.
He had her in his pool with children, clear as day, with timestamps proving he was not home at the time. That last video was particularly damning because it showed her opening his locked gate. She'd reached over, found the latch, and let herself in like it was her property. Raymond backed everything up to a cloud service, then to an external hard drive, then burned it all to a DVD for good measure. Redundancy was key. He'd seen too many cases fall apart because someone lost the only copy of critical evidence. That wouldn't happen here. The next morning, Raymond made his first official move. He called the non-emergency police line, something he'd done thousands of times from the other side. It felt strange being the caller instead of the responder. The dispatcher was professional and efficient. "I need to file a trespassing report," Raymond said. "I have video evidence of my neighbor entering my property without permission multiple times, including bringing children into my pool while I wasn't home." "Are you in any immediate danger, sir?" "No, this happened yesterday. I'm filing for documentation purposes. An officer will be out within a few hours to take your statement."
"Can you be home?"
"I'll be here." The officer who showed up was young, maybe late 20s, with that fresh eagerness that Raymond remembered from his own early years. His name tag read Wilson. Raymond invited him in, offered coffee, and laid out his documentation on the dining room table. "I'm retired from the department," Raymond said, figuring it was better to mention it up front. 25 years, just retired last year. "I'm not trying to get special treatment, but I wanted you to know I understand the process." Wilson's posture relaxed slightly. "Which department?" "Central Division, mostly. Did some time in narcotics, finished up in community relations. My uncle was Central Division. Retired about 5 years ago." "Robert Wilson?" "Bobby Wilson?" "Sure, I knew Bobby, good cop."
How's he doing?
They spent a few minutes on small talk, that natural bonding that happened when cops found common ground. Then Wilson pulled out his notepad and got down to business. "So walk me through what's been happening." Raymond did, methodically and chronologically. He showed Wilson the timeline, the photos, the video footage. Wilson watched the pool video twice, his expression growing more serious. "This is pretty clear-cut trespassing," Wilson said. "And the fact that she brought minors onto your property, into a pool situation that's concerning from a liability standpoint. If one of those kids had gotten hurt, you could have been sued. That's exactly what worried me. I don't know those children. I don't know if they can swim. I don't know if they have health conditions. She put me in a terrible legal position, not to mention the obvious property rights violation." Wilson nodded, taking notes. "Has she made any threats? Said anything that made you feel unsafe?" Raymond considered this carefully. "She's made vague, threatening statements. Things like, 'You'll regret this and this isn't over.' Nothing specific enough to be a direct threat, but concerning in context." "And you've asked her to stay off your property?" "Multiple times. Verbally, clearly witnessed by her each time. I have those confrontations on video too." Wilson finished writing and looked up. "Here's what I can do. I'll file this report, which creates an official record. I can go next door and have a conversation with her. Explain that she's trespassing and needs to stop. I can't arrest her based on video evidence of past trespassing when you didn't call it in at the time, but I can make it clear that if it happens again, there will be consequences." "That works for me. I'm not trying to ruin her life. I just need her to understand that boundaries exist and she needs to respect them. I'll handle it. And sir, given your background, you probably already know this, but keep documenting everything. People like this, they don't usually stop with one warning. They either back down completely or they escalate. You want to be ready if she escalates. Already on it. Raymond watched from his window as Wilson knocked on Linda's door. He couldn't hear the conversation, but he could read body language well enough. Linda's posture started defensive, then became animated. Lots of hand gestures and head shaking. Wilson remained calm and professional, his stance neutral but authoritative. The conversation lasted about 10 minutes. When Wilson came back to Raymond's door, he looked tired. "That's a difficult woman," Wilson said, which, coming from a cop who dealt with difficult people daily, meant something. She denied everything at first. When I told her we have video evidence, she changed her story to she was concerned about your property. Being a good neighbor, thought you wouldn't mind. I explained very clearly that entering someone's property without permission is trespassing, regardless of intent. She's been warned. If she does it again, you call immediately and we'll handle it as a criminal matter. Appreciate you taking the time. No problem. And hey, stay safe. Something about her seems off. Trust your gut on this one. Raymond thanked him and closed the door. He felt some relief having an official report on file, but Wilson's last comment stuck with him. Something about her seems off. Raymond had been thinking the same thing but hadn't quite articulated it. Linda wasn't just entitled or difficult. There was something almost calculated about her behavior, like she was testing boundaries to see what she could get away with. The relief lasted exactly 2 days. That's when Linda filed her own police report claiming Raymond had threatened and harassed her. She also filed a formal complaint with the Homeowners Association claiming Raymond was creating a hostile environment and making her feel unsafe in her own home. Raymond found out about the HOA complaint first. He got an official letter in the mail on HOA letterhead, informing him that a complaint had been filed and that the board would be investigating. They requested his presence at a hearing the following week to address the allegations. The police report he learned about when Officer Wilson called him directly. "Hey Raymond, wanted to give you a heads up. Your neighbor filed a report claiming you've been harassing her. Says you've made threatening statements, tried to intimidate her, been hostile about property line disputes." Raymond felt his blood pressure spike. "That's completely false. I have video evidence that proves otherwise. I know. I watched your videos, remember? And I met her. Between you and me, her story doesn't hold water. But the report exists now, so I wanted you to know. The responding officer will probably want to talk to you. Did she mention that she's the one who trespassed on my property? That there's already a report on file about her behavior?" She did not, which tells me she's trying to control the narrative. Get her version on record before yours carries weight. Classic manipulation tactic. Exactly. Look, you know how this works. The report exists, but that doesn't mean anything's going to come of it. You haven't committed any crimes. You've been documenting everything. You're fine, but watch yourself around her. Some people try to bait reactions they can report. Raymond thanked Wilson and hung up. He sat at his kitchen table, staring at the HOA letter, feeling anger and frustration war inside him. This was the playbook. Make false accusations. Flip the script. Paint yourself as the victim before anyone realizes you're the aggressor. He'd seen it 100 times in domestic disputes, neighborhood conflicts, workplace harassment cases. The difference was, Linda had picked the wrong target. Raymond didn't react impulsively. He didn't lose his temper. He didn't make mistakes when he was angry. He got methodical. He got thorough. And he had decades of experience dealing with people who thought they were smarter than everyone else. He spent the next few days preparing for the HOA hearing like it was the most important presentation of his life. He created a comprehensive packet for each board member, timeline of events with supporting evidence, printed photos with dates and timestamps, written statements of his attempts to resolve things peacefully, character references from other neighbors, a copy of the police report he'd filed, and a flash drive with all the video evidence organized and labeled. He also did something that proved crucial. He went to 3 different neighbors and asked them to write statements about their own interactions with Linda. Tom with the quiet beagle wrote about her noise complaints. Karen from the corner wrote about the garden-blocking sunlight accusation. Even old Mr. Chen from across the street wrote something about Linda complaining that his American flag was too patriotic and bothered her. The pattern was clear. Linda complained about everyone. She picked fights with neighbors over imaginary problems. She twisted normal situations into personal attacks against her. Raymond wasn't an isolated incident. He was just the one who documented everything and refused to back down. The HOA hearing was held in the community center on a Tuesday evening. The board consisted of 5 people, ranging from a young woman in her 30s to a retired gentleman who had to be pushing 80. The president was a no-nonsense woman named Patricia, who ran the meeting like a courtroom. Linda showed up with a folder of her own materials and a concerned expression that Raymond recognized as performance. She was playing the role of frightened neighbor, vulnerable woman being intimidated by aggressive man. It was a good act. Raymond gave her credit for that. Patricia called the meeting to order and explained the process. Linda would present her complaint first, then Raymond would respond. Then the board would ask questions and make a determination. Linda's presentation was emotional and dramatic. She talked about feeling unsafe in her own home, about Raymond's aggressive responses to her friendly attempts at neighborly communication. She claimed he'd yelled at her multiple times, used threatening language, made her afraid to go into her own backyard. She even had tears at one point, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. "I just wanted to be a good neighbor," Linda said, her voice wavering. "I tried to be friendly. I tried to share resources like the shade tree and be reasonable about property lines. But he's been hostile from day one. He's a large, intimidating man, and he uses that to make me feel threatened. I'm a woman living alone. I shouldn't have to feel afraid in my own home." Raymond watched this performance with professional detachment. She was good. If he didn't have evidence, if this came down to he said, she might actually win sympathy. The damsel in distress angle played well, especially when the man in question was a retired cop who probably looked intimidating when he wanted to. When Patricia asked if Raymond wanted to respond, he stood and distributed his evidence packets to each board member. "Everything I'm going to say is documented in these packets," Raymond said calmly. "I've included timelines, photos, videos, police reports, and witness statements from multiple neighbors. I encourage you to review them carefully because they tell a very different story than what you just heard." He walked them through the evidence methodically. Linda's first approach about property lines, her complaints about noise during a family barbecue, her furniture repeatedly placed in his yard, the photos she took of his property, and then the security footage. "This video shows Linda entering my locked property without permission," Raymond said as the board members watched on the laptop he'd brought. "You can see the timestamp. I was at a doctor's appointment. She reached over the gate, unlatched it from the inside, and let herself and 3 children into my pool area. They swam in my pool for approximately 40 minutes before I returned home." The room was silent except for the sound of splashing from the video. Raymond let it play, let them see Linda relaxing in his chair like she owned the place. When it ended, he continued, "I've also included video of her entering my yard on 2 previous occasions, looking in my windows, trying my door handle. These aren't the actions of someone afraid of me. These are the actions of someone who believes she's entitled to access my property whenever she wants." He pulled out the neighbor statements. "I've also collected statements from 3 other neighbors documenting similar patterns of complaints and confrontations with Linda. This isn't about me being aggressive. This is about a pattern of behavior where Linda creates conflicts with neighbors over imaginary problems." Patricia was flipping through the evidence packet, her expression growing increasingly troubled. The other board members were doing the same. Raymond could see the shift happening, the narrative changing as facts replaced feelings. "Ms. Linda," Patricia said, looking up, "did you enter Mr. Raymond's property without his permission?" "I was concerned about noises," Linda started, but Patricia cut her off. "Yes or no? Did you enter his property without permission?" "Technically, yes, but... And did you bring children into his pool while he was not home?" Linda's face was reddening. "The pool wasn't being used." "I didn't think..." "That's trespassing," Patricia said flatly. "That's clear trespassing. And bringing minors onto someone's property without permission creates liability issues for this entire community. If one of those children had been injured, the HOA could have been named in a lawsuit." The meeting continued for another 30 minutes, but Raymond could tell it was over. The board asked him clarifying questions about his evidence. They asked Linda to explain several contradictions between her story and the video footage. She couldn't. She tried emotional appeals, tried to redirect to how she felt rather than what she'd done. But Patricia wasn't having it. When the board finally dismissed them both to deliberate, Raymond felt confident. He'd presented facts. Linda had presented feelings. In any fair evaluation, facts won. The verdict came 3 days later in an official letter. The board found Linda's complaint to be without merit. They issued her a formal warning for trespassing on another resident's property and creating false complaints. They fined her $500 for violations of community rules regarding respect for property boundaries, and they put her on notice that any future complaints she filed would be scrutinized carefully, given her established pattern of behavior. Raymond read the letter twice, feeling vindication settle over him like a warm blanket. This was what happened when you documented everything. When you built a case instead of just reacting emotionally. When you presented evidence that couldn't be argued with. He thought maybe this would be the end of it. Thought Linda would realize she'd lost, that her tactics hadn't worked, that she needed to just be a normal neighbor and leave him alone. But Raymond had underestimated just how far Linda was willing to go. Because people who make false accusations don't usually stop when the first one fails. They escalate. They get desperate, and desperate people do unpredictable things. The real storm was still coming, and Raymond's victory at the HOA hearing had just made Linda angrier and more determined than ever. The HOA decision should have been the end of it. Raymond had won decisively, with evidence that couldn't be disputed and a ruling that clearly stated Linda was in the wrong. Most people would have accepted defeat, paid the fine, and moved on with their lives. But Linda wasn't most people. The morning after Raymond received the HOA letter, he found his car keyed. Long, deep scratches ran along both sides, the kind of damage that would cost thousands to repair. He stood in his driveway, coffee in hand, staring at the vandalism and feeling his stomach sink. He had no proof it was Linda. The scratches could have happened overnight, could have been random vandals or teenagers. But the timing was too convenient to be coincidence. He filed a police report, gave them the approximate time frame, mentioned the ongoing dispute with his neighbor. The responding officer was sympathetic but realistic. "Without video evidence or witnesses, there's not much we can do," the officer said. "Even if you suspect your neighbor, we can't prove it. Best advice is to get a camera that covers your driveway and document any future incidents." Raymond knew this already, had known it even before calling. But having it on record mattered. Another piece in the growing pile of evidence that something was very wrong with Linda's behavior. He called his insurance company, scheduled the repair, and ordered 2 more security cameras that afternoon. The cameras arrived in 2 days. Raymond installed them himself, positioning them to cover his driveway, front yard, and the side of his house that faced Linda's property. Every angle was covered now. If Linda tried something else, he'd have it on video. She tried something else the very next week. Raymond was inside watching television when he heard shouting from the street. Not normal conversation volume, but actual yelling. He got up and looked out his front window to see Linda standing on the sidewalk with 2 other women he didn't recognize. She was pointing at his house, gesturing animatedly, her voice carrying clearly through the closed window. "That's his house right there. He's been harassing me for months, threatening me, intimidating me, making me afraid to leave my own home. The HOA won't help because they're all men who stick together. Nobody cares about a woman's safety." Raymond felt ice run through his veins. She was lying to these women, spinning a completely false narrative, trying to turn the neighborhood against him. One of the women was recording on her phone, capturing Linda's performance for social media or wherever else she planned to post it. He grabbed his own phone and started recording from inside his house. Linda was on a public sidewalk, so she had no expectation of privacy. Whatever she said could be documented, and oh, was she saying things. "He watches me from his windows, stands there staring, trying to intimidate me. He yells at children for playing too loud. He threatened to call the police on me just for sitting in my own yard. The man is unstable and nobody will do anything about it." Every single statement was a lie or a wild distortion of the truth. Raymond had never watched her from his windows. He'd asked children to keep the noise down during a family barbecue, which was his right. He'd called the police when she trespassed on his property and used his pool without permission. But the way Linda told it, he sounded like a neighborhood menace. One of the women with her was nodding sympathetically, clearly buying the story. The other looked a bit more skeptical, glancing at Raymond's house like she was trying to assess the situation. Linda noticed the skeptical one and doubled down. I know it sounds extreme, but I'm genuinely afraid. I've documented everything. I have dates, times, witnesses. I'm thinking about getting a restraining order because I don't feel safe. A woman shouldn't have to live in fear in her own neighborhood. A restraining order, based on lies. Raymond felt anger burning in his chest, but he forced himself to stay calm, stay inside, keep recording. Confronting her now would just feed her narrative. Better to let her talk. Let her dig her own grave with provable lies. The conversation lasted another 10 minutes before the women left. Raymond immediately downloaded the video to his computer, backed it up, and sent a copy to Officer Wilson with a detailed email explaining what had happened. Wilson called him within an hour. "This is getting concerning. She's escalating from property disputes to character assassination. Have you thought about getting a lawyer involved?" "I've thought about it. Wasn't sure it was necessary yet. It might be. If she's talking about restraining orders based on false allegations, you need legal protection. A restraining order on your record could affect you even if it's baseless. And if she's spreading lies about you publicly, that's potentially defamation." Raymond thanked him and hung up. Wilson was right. This had moved beyond neighborhood drama into territory that could genuinely damage his life. He called a lawyer that afternoon, someone he'd worked with occasionally during his police career. A good attorney who specialized in civil disputes and defamation cases. The consultation was enlightening. The lawyer, whose name was Mitchell, listened to the whole story, reviewed Raymond's evidence, and gave his professional opinion. "You have an excellent case if you want to pursue legal action," Mitchell said. "Her trespassing is documented. Her false statements to the HOA are documented. Now she's making public false accusations that could damage your reputation. That's textbook defamation. We could send a cease and desist letter, or we could file a civil suit for harassment and defamation. What would you recommend?" "Start with the cease and desist. It's less aggressive, gives her a chance to back down, and it creates a paper trail if things escalate further. Sometimes people like this back off when they realize legal consequences are real. But keep documenting everything, and if she continues, we move to a lawsuit." Raymond agreed. Mitchell drafted a cease and desist letter that was delivered to Linda 2 days later. It was professional and firm, outlining her pattern of behavior, the documented evidence against her, and demanding that she stop all forms of harassment, trespassing, and defamatory statements immediately. It warned that failure to comply would result in legal action, including